Beautiful. We're trying not to spill the coffee on it. As long as they can see me, we're okay. I got to see the Gemara. So, good. Good morning, Rabosai. Thanks so much to Moshe for setting up. Good morning, everyone on Zoom. So today's daf is Yoma 24, Chaf Daled. Our sponsors for today, we have a Talmud Torah sponsors of Yona Shushie Ehrenfeld in loving memory and Zecher Nishmas, their grandfather Yosef ben Shmuel Aron Zal, and by Marc Karstaedt in memory of his mother Chana Bat Shraggai Zal. We have a Daf Yomi sponsor for today of Ira and Miriam Grossman in memory of Ephraim Gordon Zal, who was tragically murdered Ford's Lane on Sunday night, an anti-Semitic incident. And thank you for all our sponsors, and Hashem should protect us and keep us safe, and we should be able to Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. So we are starting on 23b, kind of near the middle of the page, or about 20 lines up, and if you find the Tosfos on the right side of 23b, the Tosfos Yilbosh, and you go a little bit to the left, then we're going to be picking up right about there. We're on the topic of Trumas Hadeshin and Hotzas Hadeshin. This was the first avoda done in the morning in the temple, and this is where we started the parak off with the foot races. Remember, they were racing up the ramp to decide who would do Trumas Hadeshin. Originally, they thought no one would want to do it. It's early in the morning. You're schlepping ashes around. So they didn't bother holding a lottery. And then they said, well, there's some Kohanim showing up. Let's have a foot race. You know, boys will be boys. Let's have a race and see who is going to make it. And they'll do Trumas Hadeshin. Then we had an incident with, yesterday we discussed there was, Lo Aleinu, there was a tragic killing on the ramp of the Mizbeach during the race. Things got very heated. It was a very exciting race. And there was also, the Mishnah brings, a broken leg incident. The sages decided to institute a payasot, a lottery, a pur. Purim is a lottery also, so it was a pur. They would switch to that. But this avoda they were trying to do was the Trumas Hadeshin and the removing of ash from the Mizbeach. And we discussed that this is the first avoda of the day, but you're actually cleaning up from yesterday. And Rabbi Silber has spoken that it's very good to start each day on a clean slate, that you're not burdened by what happened yesterday. Today's a new day, and you can move on a clean slate. That's one of the messages of Trumas Hadeshin and Hotzas Hadeshin that we're discussing. It's one of the reasons we wash our hands in the morning, because one of the reasons given is we're a Bria Chadasha, we're a new creation. So we're something new, we should clean up. We're new, starting on a clean slate every morning. So that's one of the messages in Hashkafa of Trumas Hadeshin. Now the machlokes was, what does he wear during Trumas Hadeshin? What does he wear when he's schlepping ashes around? And it comes out, we'll backtrack one line. The rabbi read this yesterday, but we're right next to this Tosfos Yilbash, Kidatana Devei Rishmael. There's a teaching from Devei Rishmael. The Tana Devei Rishmael, Begodim Shabishel Behen Kedera, L'Rabba, what you cooked for your master in, Lo Yimzug Behen Kos L'Rabba. You shouldn't be the butler, and you shouldn't pour his wine. Mizigas Kos, of course, they mixed wine with water, they had very strong wine. But whatever you cooked in, and it has smoke, and it has stains, and it has food, it has schmutz, you shouldn't also be the butler and go to the dining room table and pour wine for the guests in the same clothing. So too, the Trumas Hadeshin was done in, we're going to see exactly what kind of clothing, but not necessarily the same clothing a kohen would normally wear. Good. Amaresh Lakish, ki machloket behotza, kach machloket beharama. So this machlok we're talking about is at the end of yesterday, we talked about Rabbi Eliezer said it's not really an avoda, that this Hotzas Hadeshin is not a true avoda, and the other sages said, yes, it's a true avoda. So he says, Reish Lakish says, this also applies to the truma. Now the truma was they went up and they removed some of the ash from the Mizbeach and they put it in the Makam Hadeshin, in the ash depository, and then when that got a little big, they would, Hotzas Hadeshin, they would take that out of the temple to the place where they took the ashes. It's really a two-step process, the harama, or the Trumas Hadeshin, and the Hotzas Hadeshin, the removing it from the temple entirely. So he says, just like the Hotzah, the second stage of the process, there's a machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer says it's not a real avoda, and it could be done even by a Kohen Baal Mum. It's not a 100% avoda that needs a Kohen who's completely, has no mum and is completely fitting. So to the Trumas Hadeshin, he would allow that also. Rabbi Yochanan Amar machlokes behotzah. Only behotzas Hadeshin, Rabbi Eliezer allows a Kohen Baal Mum. Aval harama's Trumas Hadeshin, divrei kol avodahi. That's a real avoda, and a Kohen Baal Mum need not apply. Does anyone remember what the Kohanim who are Baal Mum did in the temple? Worms. They did worms. Exactly, yeah, firewood. Remember, in Shkolim, there was this famous story. There was a Kohen, Baal Mum was deworming the wood, and he said, hey, that tile looks strange there. Anyone know why? And then he died. Yeah, the Aron. Yeah, apparently that was the way to get to the Aron somehow, and that was in the Lishkas Eitzim, and one of the Kohen Balmum discovered it and was struck dead before he could tell anyone where that tile was. So soon. We're going to get the temple back soon, and we're going to have the Aron soon. So no worries. So that was the Kohanim Balmum, could also do, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Hotzas Adeshin at least, and according to Reish Lakish, also the Chumas Adeshin. So typical avodahi. My time of the Reish Lakish. Why does Reish Lakish say that Trumas Adeshin is not a full-fledged avoda, just like Hotzas Adeshin? Amar Lecha, he's going to tell you, if you would have thought avodahi, it's a true, full-fledged avoda. Yesh lecha avoda shekasher b'shnei kelim. Is there ever an avoda which is kosher with only 2 of the 4 articles of clothing? So what's going on is the pasuk. We're going to see the pasuk in depth, but the pasuk mentions his midah, which is his kisonis, his tunic, and his michnasayim. So the pashtus of the pasuk, and we're going to get into it, is that he was only wearing his shirt and his pants when he was doing Trumas Hadeshin, and not all 4 kelim. So he's going to tell me, Rish Lakish says, you tell me there's an avoda that's a real avoda, but it only needs half of the clothing? That can't be a real avoda. Abi Yochanan, how does he say? Gali rachamana b'ketonis u'michnasayim. He says, the Torah explicitly tells us about the ketonet, the tunic or shirt, and the michnasayim, the pants. Puadin lemitznefet ba'avnet. But of course, he's wearing his hat and his belt. If you're going to wear 2 of the big day kahuna, you're going to be wearing 4 of them. You're never going to have a time where you're only wearing half of the clothing of the Kohen. He's also going to put on the hat and the belt. Maishna hani. So what is different about these 2 items, the tunic and the pants, that they're listed in the pasuk, and the other 2 are not listed? It doesn't say he puts on his tunic and his pants and his belt and his hat. It only says the tunic and the pants. Mido vod. So it's a drasha. We need them for a drasha. Mido vod. Mido kemidato. That his mido, his shirt or his tunic, has to be in his measurement, has to be fitting him. He can't wear a shirt that's too big or too small. Michnesevad, and the pants of linen, like the Baraisa teaches, minayin shlo yehei davar kodem lemichnesayim. How do we know Kohen does not put on any articles of clothing before the pants? Shenamar u'michnesevad yilbash al bisaro. The pants of linen he will wear on his skin. So he doesn't wear anything else until he puts his pants on first. Reish Lakish mido. So that's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. He's saying those 2 words are needed for a drasha, but just the fact that you have the tunic and the pants listed in the pasuk, that doesn't mean he's only wearing his tunic and his pants, Rabbi Yosai. Rabbi Yochanan is going to tell you he's wearing all 4 of the regular begadim that a Kohen would wear when he's doing his Trumas Hadeshin. Reish Lakish, who says no, he's dafka wearing 2 things. So what does he do? Where does he get these drashot about the clothing of the Kohen? Mido kemidato. So he says mido kemidato, that his midah, his tunic, his suit coat has to be in the right measurement. That's why the Torah calls it lashon mido. Rashi points out it should have said ketones. We all know what a ketones is. Mido means his measure, like we have midos. We have a maseches midos with the measurements of the temple, and we have midos in general that we understand that are the measurements of a man as how he acts, his hashkafas hachayim, his motivations. That's something we always work on, is having good midos in general, but midot, it means his measure. So it should have said ketonis, according to Reish Lakish. So it means really it's just referring to the shirt here. But mido is to teach me out that it's kimidaso, it's fitting him. We all know that wearing a suit looks great, but if the suit doesn't fit, it's you should have just stuck to the polo shirt. That's how it is. So mido kimidasa midabkim lashon mido shelo yehei davar kodem l'michnasayim. How does Reish Lakish know you don't put anything on before the pants? Me'al besaro nafka. So it mentions the pants, but also says me'al besaro, that they go directly onto his flesh, directly onto his body without anything else, nafka. So Reish Lakish says, when it says the pants and the shirt, the ketonis and the michnasayim, it's dafka. He's wearing those 2 with Trumas Hadeshin and not the hat and the belt as well. Ne'miketanai. So let's say this machlokes, Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, is also machlokes tanaim that we had learned out. All bisaro. This is going to sound familiar because we learned this on Daf Yod Beis. Al bisaro, on his flesh, mal tamad lomar yilbash. So it already says he puts it on his flesh. Why does it also say yilbash? Rahavi mitznefet ve'avneit. So this extra yilbash includes the mitznefet and the avneit, the hat and the belt. And the pasuk here is, I have the pasuk inside. I'll read ve'lavash hakohen mido vad michnasei vad. So, and the Kohen wears his mido vad, which is his ketones, which is the right size, and michnes evad, and his linen pants, Yilbash al Besaro. He wears. You have lavash and v'yilbash. You have it twice, like we said back on Daf Yud Beis. You have it twice. The Heri Mesadeshin. So you have two words of wearing. So it's not just the tunic and the pants, but it's also going to be his hat and his belt. Yilbash lahavi mitznefet va'avne. It's the harama for Trumas Adeshin. Divri Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Dosa Omer l'rabus bigdei Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippur. And he says this extra Yilbash actually refers to the begadim of the Kohen Gadol shekesherim leKohen Hedyot, that you could recycle them and use them for a Kohen Hedyot on other days of the year, because Rabbi Dosa held that the begadim of the Kohen Gadol were identical. The white linen begadim, not the 8 begadim with the gold and the tzitz and everything, but the 4 begadim that were special for Yom Kippur, Rabbi Dosa held were identical to the normal begadim of a Kohen Hedyot, and they could be recycled for the rest of the year, for a Kohen Hedyot only. Amar Rabbi says, Shtei teshuvot b'davar. He says, I have 2 refutations to Rabbi Dosa. Chada de avneto shekohen gadol lo ze avneto shekohen Hedyot. He says, first of all, the belts were not the same. He says, over there, they talk about it on Yud Beis, but it seems that the belt of the Kohen Gadol was definitely pure linen. There's a machlokas about the belt of the Kohen Hedyot, that one opinion says it was all linen, the other one says it was shatnez. It was mamash, it was wool and linen they were wearing to do the avoda all year for the Kohen Hedyot. So that's what the Rebbe says, it wasn't the same belt. V'od, also, begadim shenishtamshta behen kedusha chamora, these begadim that the Kohen Gadol wore, lifnai v'lifnim, in the Kaidish HaKadoshim. He wore these 4 white garments, these 4 linen garments. We're going to have a lot more about that in Yoma later on. He should wear tishtamesh behen kedusha kala. A regular Kohen should wear them just to take out Trumas Hadeshen, just to do it every day avoda. So we have a concept malin bekodesh for meridian. So you can't degrade these special begodim. Elamatam lobar yilbash. Rabbi says, what does yilbash mean? Turning over to the top of 24a, lerabot et shechakim. This includes even worn out garments, like Rabbi Silver said yesterday, that they would wear pachutim, lesser garments when they did chotzas hadeshin, shumas hadeshin. When you're working with ashes, they would wear not the brand new kohanic vestments, but slightly worn out ones. Rashi points out here on top, shekeshem lekol avoda bilvad shelo yehei mikarayin, as long as they're not ripped. So they could be a little bit worn out, a little bit old, but as long as they're not ripped, it would be okay. It seems even that bloodstains were okay. We don't say that they washed off the bloodstains. They were kind of proud of that in the temple, so a beautiful thing. But even worn out ones are okay. Thank you, Moshe and Moshe. And he leaves them there. This is talking about the begadim of the Kohen Gadol. So they need to be gones. We actually bury them. Rabbi Dosa, Rabbi Dosa, to his opinion, he says you could recycle them for a Kohen Hedyot for the rest of the year, because he held the belts were identical from the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur's white vestments to the Kohen Hedyot the rest of the year. And Chamsham means you couldn't use them for the next Yom Kippur. So even according to Rabbi Dosa, you could recycle Big Day Kohen Gadol, the white vestments from Yom Kippur. It was only for one Yom Kippur. And then a Kohen Hedyot could use it the rest of the year, but you could not use it again the next Yom Kippur. You had to make a new set every year. We're actually going to see that later on in the Gemara. Not today, but later. Maila b'haka miflagei. Isn't this the same machlokes, Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, that we started talking about? Is the Trumas Hadeshin a real avoda with 4 begadim, or is it a quasi avoda with only 2 begadim? Demar Savar avodahi, that Rabbi Yehuda says, listen, you need all 4 begadim, and this extra yilbash includes the hat and the belt as well, not just the tunic and the pants. Umar Savar, and Rabbi Dosa says, lav avodahi. Rabbi Dosa says, no, that yilbash is for the ability to recycle the big day Kohen Gadol, the white vestments that could be used by a Kohen Hedyot. So that's the same machlokes as he would hold like Reish Lakish, that it's not a full-fledged avoda, only needs 2 garments low. The Gemara says, no, the kule alma avodahi. Both Rabbi Dosa and Rabbi Yehuda agree that the Trumas Hadeshin is a full-fledged mamish and avoda, and they would agree with Rabbi Yochanan that it needs all 4 begadim of the Kohen. So here's what they're disagreeing with between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Dosa. Mar savar tzricha kra l'Rabbi. One says we need the pasuk, we need the extra yilbash. Rabbi Yehuda says we need yilbash to include all 4 begadim for Trumas Hadeshin. Mar savar lo tzricha. He says, Rabbi Dosa says it's obvious. If you're wearing your pants and your shirt, the Torah doesn't have to tell you to also put on your belt and your hat. So, he says it's obvious you don't need the pasuk to include all 4 vestments, but both Rabbi Dosa and Rabbi Yehuda could hold that the Trumas Hadeshin is a full-fledged avoda like Rabbi Yochanan does. Good. So by Rabbi Avin, Trumas Hadeshin Bekama. Rabbi Avin asked a great question. How much is a Trumas Hadeshin? How much is that? So we got to check it out. We got to find out how much are you required to take off ashes from the Mizbeach from yesterday's avoda and take them out to the storage place, and then later they would remove them from the temple entirely. So let's learn Mitrumas Meiser. Why don't we learn Trumas Meiser Yelfinan? So Mitrumas Meiser Yelfinan, and Rashi says Daha Herim Kasiv. So by Trumas Meiser it says Herim, Lashon v'haremotem mimenu. So that's in the Rashi. Meiser Yofinan law, we could learn it from Meiser, which is 10%, Trumas Meiser 10%. Omi Trumas Midian Yofinan, we could learn it from Trumas Midian. And Rashi points out too, by Trumas Midian, Dichsiv, V'haremota mechem Lashem. That's actually interesting. I pulled out a Chumash, and it's not so simple by the war with Midian. Remember, the war with Midian was a war of divine revenge, and we sent over exactly 12,000 soldiers, one from each shevet, and not one of them died in the battle. It was Maisa Nisim, and the soldiers knew it. This is an amazing thing. And the pasuk says in Matot, "V'haremota meches," you will raise up a tax Lashem to Hashem me'et anshe milchama, from the men of war, hayotzim letzava, who went out to the army, echad nefesh mechamesh hameot, 1/500th. Min adam, min bakar, min chamurim, min tzons. This was not 1/10. This is 1 out of 500. But there's more. Machatzitam tikachu v'natana the Elazar Kohen trumat Hashem. Machatzit bnei Yisrael tikach echad achuz min chamishi min adam, min bakar, min chamurim. So it's a very strange thing. What happened was when the soldiers brought back the booty from Midian to camp, the soldiers took half, and then the other half they gave to all of Klal Yisrael. So they split it half and half, which is an amazing thing. And then the command from Hashem to Moshe is the soldiers should take 1 in 500 of everything, from the people, from the cattle, from the donkeys, from everything they won, and give it to Elazar and give it to the Kohanim. And for the other half, the half that was given to the non-soldiers, the rest of the camp, they took 1 in 50. So it's a really strange thing. Normally a truma, we saw a truma could be 10%, and now we're seeing it could be 1 in 500. Or maybe 1 in 50. But the stream of the soldiers is 1 in 500, and it's sort of a strange number. I don't know why Hashem picked 1 in 500. 1 in 50 I would understand, because there were 12,000 soldiers and 600,000 odd Jews. So that's 1 in 50. The soldiers maybe thought they were representing the Jewish people. Every soldier represents 50 men back in the camp. But the 1 in 500, okay, that's our homework. So someone please figure that out. Look in the sources. Please get back to me, because the 1 in 500 is a little strange. But that's a possibility Rabbi Avin raises. Are we going to learn from Trumas Meiser 10% or Trumas Midian, where the soldiers gave 1 in 500 of everything they won? Tashima, so let's come and learn out. So he resolves it. The Tane Rabbi Chia, now Markan v'Heirim. It says here Heirim, then Malahalan Heirim. I'm going to let you know where that is in a second. Malahalan bekomso, Afkan bekomso. This is talking about a mincha. So this v'Heirim is by a mincha, and Rabbi Chia is comparing it to this pasuk, which is in Vayikra Perek Vav. Beheri mimenu bekumtso, he lifts up from it bekumtso, in his komets. Misola mincha, from the fine flour of the mincha, mishamna, and from its oil, vetkol lehalovona, and all of the frankincense that was on top of the mincha, asher ala mincha, vehiktir hamizbeach reach nichoach askrata lashem. So when he does the kamitza of the mincha, now kamitza is one of these funny words, it's hard to translate. So we're going to show you. This is a kamitza, like this. He sticks his hand like this into the mincha, zoop, it comes out like this. So this amount, under my 3 fingers, that's a komets. And of course, komtso means his komets, because it varies by Kohen. Some of the Kohanim, they're the big basketball player kind of guys, and they got really big fingers, they can get a lot under that komets. When they had to do an exact komets, they would lift it up like this, and they would use their thumb and their pinky actually to scrape off the sides, so they only got exactly what was under the 3 fingers. But the komtso is a very small amount. It's not even a handful, half a handful. It's a komets. That's what it's a kumtso. It's like a scoop out. So by the mincha, they would scoop out the fine flour and some of the oil and all of the frankincense, and that's what would be burned on the mizbeach, and the rest would be made into bread and eaten by the kohanim. But here he's saying you only need a komets. We're learning out from the mincha to the trumas hadeshin. You only need take more. You can take more, but as long as you're taking off at least a komets, of the ashes. Now, probably he would use a kli to remove them because there might be some fiery charcoal and embers in there. But as long as you're taking off at least a kometz, his kometz, then it's enough of a trumas hadeshin. So as long as you're moving on from the past to some extent, you're dealing with the past, you're putting it away, you're accomplishing something and you're moving forward. But it's interesting in Bikumtso, I think the comparison Rabbi Chia makes is because the mincha was also done in the temple, whereas the Trumas Meiser and the Midian obviously were not so shaykh to the temple, but the kometz of the mincha was. So he says that's the best comparison. So the minimum amount for Trumas Hadeshin is just a kometz, just Bikumtso, that's all. Good. Amarav Arba Avodos. There are 4 services in the temple, Zar Chayev Alehen Mita, where a non-Kohen who performs them is Nebuch Chayev Misa B'dei Shemayim. What are they? Zrika, which is spritzing the dam, throwing the dam on the Mizbech. Haktara, burning the incense. Nisuch Hamayim, pouring the water onto the Mizbech. V'nisuch Hayayin, pouring wine onto the Mizbech. Anyone know when they poured water? Sukkos, beautiful. Anyone know when they poured wine? Every day. So you see from here, Rabosai, wine every day. A-okay, that's pretty good. V'Levi Amar, af Trumas Hadeshin. Levi includes our famous Trumas Hadeshin. He says, a Zar who does a Trumas Hadeshin is Chayev Misa. It's a real full-fledged avoda. V'ken tani Levi b'mas nisei. And so too taught Levi in his Mishnah, af Trumas Hadeshin. He says, even Trumas Hadeshin, a Zar is Chayev Misa for this. My time at the Rav, what is Rav's reasoning that he doesn't include Trumas Hadeshin? Dichsiv ve'ata uvanecha itacha. So this is a command to Aharon, you and your sons with you. Tishmeru et kunatchem. Guard your kahunaness, your kahuna charge. The kol devar mizbeach, for anything mizbeach related. Or mibet lafarochet, anything inside the curtains. Ve'avadtem avodat matana. And you will do the work of matana. Now, matana could mean a gift or it could mean giving or application. We're going to see that's how Rav learns it. Eten et kunatchem. I give to you the kehunanis. V'hazar karev yumat. And a zar who approaches to do these things will die. So Rav is learning out from this pasuk. We're going to see that there are a lot of requirements for an avoda to actually be chayav misa if a zar does it. So how does he learn this out? Avodas matana. V'lo avodat siluk. So avodat matana. Matana could mean a gift given to the Kohen, but here it means application. So applying blood or wine or water or incense or fire. That's what's going to be avodat matana, which could be chayav azar for doing this avoda. Avoda siluk. Siluk is removing. We have a famous phrase in the Gemara. I salka daitach. I salka daitach. Salka is the same lashon, same shor siluk. If your mind would take out, if your mind would take out from here, so maybe you learn it a different way. So then the isakadaitach is used to contrast, maybe you shouldn't learn out from there, you should learn something else from there. But siluk is removal, matana giving, applying, siluk removal. Avadtem, avodatama. So avadtem, you could read avadtam, and tam means perfect, like we say, Torah is sam tam, is a perfect remedy to all that ails you. Avadtam, avodatama, a pure avoda, like the final avoda, velo avoda sheyesh achrei avoda, and not an avoda that has another avoda after it. Avoda sheyesh achrei avoda. V'levi Rabbi Rachmana lekol davar mizbeach. So Levi says it says kol davar mizbeach. That's anything on the mizbeach. That would include even Trumas Hadeshin, Hotzas Hadeshin. V'Rav hahu lesui sheva hazayot shebifnim. Rav says this anything on the mizbeach, kol davar mizbeach. This includes the 7 sprinklings that are inside, that these are done on Yom Kippur, the chataot pnimiot. We're going to learn a lot about these, but the par in certain karbanot, the blood was applied inside the temple building, not just outside on the big mizbech. Uv metzora, and the sprinklings on the metzora. Levi nafkale mid davar kol davar. And Levi learns those out from, it doesn't just say davar, it says kol davar, so those 7 sprinklings inside the temple building, and for the metzora, that's learned out there. Rav davar kol davar lo darish. But Rav, he says, I know he doesn't learn extra from Kol Davar, so he needs these Kol Davar Mizbeach to learn the 7 sprinklings inside and the ones for the Mitzvah. Do we know where they sprinkled those 7 sprinklings inside? Some mumblings and rumblings. So it's not so clear, but it seems it was on the Parochis. And there's an amazing story, and since we're not even a week out of Lag BaOmer, I'm going to tell you this amazing story. And this is amazing, it's a true story, Rabosai. I know it's true, because it's in the Gemara on Me'ila Daf 17b, And in this true story, Bar Yochai goes to Rome. So this is, I think it's a kid's book, right? Bar Yochai goes to Rome. It sounds like it should be a kid's book, but it's actually a little bit troubling because the Romans, because they're Romans, they made a gezerah against the Jewish people, a horrible gezerah, and no one could get it. We tried bribery, we tried political connections, we tried everything, couldn't get it annulled. Bar Yochai says, I'm going to go to Rome, I'm going to fix it. So Bar Yochai goes to Rome. And on the way, a demon comes out to meet Bar Yochai. And the demon says, I'm going to go possess the daughter of the Caesar, and then you'll be able to remove me from the daughter of Caesar when you get there. So they get there, and the Caesar is bereft. His daughter is crazy. She was probably fiddling and burning Rome. Who knows what she was doing? So Bar Yochai knows the true name of the demon and is able to expunge the demon from Caesar. And Caesar says, wonderful, you can have anything you want from my treasury. Bar Yochai goes in there, finds the gezerah, the scroll of the gezerah, zhup, rips it up. No more gezerah. But while they're in there, Bar Yochai and the rabbi with him, they say, oh, they saw the parochus was there in Rome. This was after the Churban. Bar Yochai lived after the Churban, Babayis. They saw the parochus was in the treasury in Rome, and it was covered with spritzed blood. There's Me'ila 17b. You can't make this up, Rabosai. The climax of the story is Bar Yochai, after he says, Nebuch for us. He says, what do you mean Nebuch? He says, Nebuch for us, that we had to be saved by a demon. Hagar, the Mitzri, the wife of the Pelegish of Abraham, was saved by an angel. Saved by an angel. We just get a demon. He says, so you understand, Bar Yochai was a little humble there. It's interesting. The Romans. It's interesting. We said this harama was harama 10% or 2% or 1 in 500. There's a word in English which actually has an interesting connotation, and the word is decimate. Anyone know what decimate means? Destroy. But decimal is tenth, right? Destroy to a tenth, literally. So it's a Roman word. The Romans invented decimate. I want to give you an idea of who the Romans were. So this has tachlis. When the Romans usually won wars. The Romans were terrible, bloodthirsty conquerors. They usually won a war. What happens when the Romans lost a battle? So if there was any cowardice by the Roman troops, then they would get an order to decimate. Now, decimate means that every platoon of 10 Roman soldiers would draw lots, like our Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash. They would draw lots, and those 10 men of that platoon would kill one of their own members by beating him to death with their bare hands. And that would teach the Roman soldiers not to be so cowardly next time and go and win the battle and be more bloodthirsty and more aggressive. So that's the word decimate. We think it means totally wipe out or destroy. It literally means 1 out of 10. And it has such a horrible connotation in English because the Romans were doing this horrible thing to themselves. So you understand, Rabosai, if the Romans would, without any compunction, murder their own soldiers, they have no mercy for themselves, Kal v'chomer, they had no mercy on Jews. Now we understand why Bar Yochai went to go hide in a cave when the Romans had it in for him, because the Romans were a nasty people. And we understand that in modern culture, they say, oh, the Romans, antiquities, the Romans and the Greeks, wonderful, wonderful. But the Talmud contains, a true depiction of the Romans and the Greeks. They were, they had culture, Baruch Hashem, they had literature, Baruch Hashem, but they were also could be very bloodthirsty. And that word in English, decimate, reminds us of the atrocities of the Romans and how they treated themselves, Kal v'chomer, how they treated us and our forefathers. And we understand why a Jew would, Bar Yochai or any Jew would want to run away from the Romans. Anyway, good. So we've gone on a tangent within a tangent, but that was the parochus, where they did the 7 hazayot shebifnim, and a machlokes, if kol davar mizbeach is learned out to those 7 hazayos, would only be allowed by a Kohen, and a Zar who went in and did those would be chayav misa or not. Good. F'emo the kol davar mizbeach klal. Why don't we say that kol davar mizbeach is a klal? Anything mizbeach related. Avodat matana prat, and avodat matana, a service involving application, is a specific, a prat, klal prat, and now we have a klal and a prat together. Ein beklal elamasha beprat. So the klal should only include what's in the prat, which is avodat matana, an avoda, which is an application. Avodat matana in, avodat silik lo. So it should only be an application and not like a truma sedeshin or hitzah sedeshin. So Rav should be right. Avodat silik lo. Amar kra, turning over to Amud Beis. U'limibeitz la parochet. But the pasuk also includes mibeitz la parochet, inside of the curtains. Ve'avatam. And you did. So it should include only mibeit la parochet, which would not include the mizbeach outside, which would not include truma sedeshin. V'avatem el mi beis laparoches hu de avoda matana. So when you do an avoda, which is inside the curtains, mi beit laparochet, mi beit bait is a house, mi beit laparochet inside of the curtains, hu de avoda matana. That's when you need an avoda matana for a zar, non-kohen to be chayav misa. V'lo avoda tziluk, and not an avoda tziluk, not an avoda of removal. Habachutz, but outside in the courtyard of the temple where the mizbeach is, where the Trumas Hadeshin would take place, afil avoda tziluk, even avoda tziluk. We see it could be like Levi, that even a avoda of removing the ashes, a zar could be chayav misa. Ihachi, if that's so, avatem nami elmi beit laparochetu, de avoda tama lo avoda sheyesh avoda. So if you're going to tell me mi beis laparoches applies to the entire pasuk that we're learning out when a zar is chayav misa, zar krev yumat, then we would say that so too an avoda tama is only required inside, but outside, even an avoda that has an avoda after it, even a preparatory stage of the avoda, a zar should be chayav misa. We see according to Rav, that's not so. Rav says only avoda tama, avoda tama, a final stage of avoda, that's when a zar is chayav misa. Chabachutz, afilo avoda sheyesh avoda, that would be chayav misa. If you're going to learn this, mi beit laparochet modifier applies to the entire pasuk. V'adam hadar arve. So no, v'avadtam hadar arve. At the end of the pasuk, avadtam or vadtem is actually how it's spelled. Hadir, it goes back v'arve kra, and it mixes the pasuk together. That avoda tama applies anywhere, not just inside mibit laparochet, inside the temple, but also outside in the courtyard on the mizbeach. Bai Rave asked, avoda tziluk beheichel mahu. What about in the heichel? Now we said mibit laparochet is inside the curtain. But where was the curtain? It was between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodshim. So this Beit LaParochet means mamish, the inner sanctum, or bosai. So that's when that would apply, this modifier Beit LaParochet. And we learned that outside might be different. By the courtyard of the Mizbeach would be different. But Heichal is in the middle. It's not the inner sanctum, and it's not outside in the courtyard. So what about the Heichal? Heichal mahu lifnim midaminan le. Do we compare it to inside, to the inner sanctum, Beit LaParochet, as the pasuk calls it? Or do you compare it to outside by the big mizbeach, midaminan lei hadar pashte? So Rava answers his own question. Always good if you can to look in the sources, answer your own questions. Rava did mi beit ul mi beit. So it doesn't just say mi beit laparochet. It says ul mi beit, which would include the heichal elameata. So, but from here, zar shesider at the shulchan lechayev. A zar who went in and put bread on the table. We just talked about this within the past week, about putting the bread on the table, and there were 12 loaves, and remember there was a discussion how many the Kohen Gadol could get. Would he always get 6, which was half, because the pasuk says half for Aaron, half for Banav. Sometimes he would get 5, sometimes he would get 4, depending if other Mishmar of Kohen was staying over, and they needed 2 extra breads. So there was a whole discussion about that, but remember that when they set the table with 12 breads, they took it off every Shabbat and put on new breads, and then on Shabbat they ate the breads. But a zar, if you're going to tell me that a heichal is like inside the curtains, so a zar who set the table would be chayiv misa, who put the bread on the table. Ika sidr bazichin. So no, not necessarily. If you put the bread on the table, it's not the final stage of the avoda, because there's sidr bazichin. Because we put these bazichin, these cups of this spice onto the table as well. Sidr bazichin l'chayiv. So if a zar did that, he should be chayiv. Ika siluk. So there is the removal, the haktara. They would remove the bazichin and then burn them on the mizbeach. So then he'd be chayav for that. Zar should see there at the Ika siluk haktara. So haktara he would be chayav. So a zar who does haktara, who burns these bazichin or burns the ketores, he would be chayav. A zar can't do a haktara. So then they ask amazing questions. Zar should siddur at the menorah lechayev. So a zar who sets up the menorah should be chayav. Rashi here says they would take the cups out of the menorah every morning and clean out the cups from the oil residue and put in new oil, new wicks, things like this. Every morning they'd have to reset the menorah, like some of us do for Hanukkah. Ika netinas petila. So, but there is the putting in the wick after that. So just cleaning out the cups, as Rashi describes it, the siddur menorah, setting up the menorah, is not chayev because you still have to put the wicks in. Natan petila lechayev. If a zar, a non-Kohen, puts in the wicks, he should be chayev. Ika netinas shemen. So you still have to put it in the oil. So we see they put the wicks in before the oil. Natan shemen lechayev. So he puts in the shemen, he should be chayev. Ika hadlaka. There's still the lighting. Hadlaka lechayev. So zar who lights the menorah should be chayev. Hadlaka lav avodahi. Hadlaka is not an avoda. That sounds strange. Sounds a little strange. V'lai, hadlaka is not an avoda. V'tanya, but there's a brisa which we learn out. It's mashma that it is. V'natnu b'nei Aharon Kohen eish ala mizbeach, And the sons of Aaron a Kohen, that sounds like Kohanim to me, Rabbi Yosai, they're going to put fire on the Mizbech, v'archu eitzim al eish, and they're going to arrange the logs, the wood, onto the fire. This teaches us al hatzatat alita, that even on igniting kindling, alita, Rashi says it could be even splinters, little kindling that they would use to start up the fire or move from one pyre to another, move the flames. Shalot tehei ela b'kohen kosher. So it has to be Aaron and Banav are the ones who light up the fire. So even just igniting the fire, even just igniting a little splinter, has to be Aaron and Banav. Kosher uba kli sharet, and they have to be wearing their big day kahuna. When you light up the barbecue, you light up the fire in the morning, he's got to be in his big day kahuna already. Hatzata delita avodahi. So the Gemara makes a chiluk. Hatzata delita, lighting up the splinters and the kindling to start the whole pyre on top of the mizbech, that's an avoda. That needs big day kahuna. That needs mamish kohanim. Hadlaka lava vodahi, but simply lighting the wicks of the menorah is not an avoda. This is a very strange thing, and it has a lot of ramifications. There's an amazing Rambam, and the Rambam Paskins, I have him in I don't have the Rambam in my phone, but I do have Svaria in my phone. So the Rambam Paskins, he talks about shchita. Remember, shchita kasher bizarre. Everyone agrees. Actually, not everyone agrees. There was a whole machlokes by Shmuel Hanavi, if shchita kasher bizarre. But that's a whole other story. So that's a tangent for another time. But after Shmuel Hanavi, everyone agreed, and Elia Cohen disagreed. But after that, everyone agreed that shchita kasher bizarre. And then Rambam talks about that, and then he says, "V'ken hadlaka tanerot kashera bizarim." It says a non-Kohen could light the menorah. V'fichach im heiti v'Kohen et tanerot. Therefore, if the Kohen prepared the nerot, remember we talked about hatava nerot, preparing the cups and the wicks and the oil, et tanerot v'hotzal l'chutz, and brought the menorah outside. Mutar lazar lahadlikan. A non-Kohen could light the menorah. This is an amazing Rambam. The Ravid and the Kesef Mishnah scream about that. Not literally scream, but they write very strongly about this. They say this is ridiculous because what it sounds like is there are some avodot where a non-Kohen is chayiv mita, but even ones where he's not chayiv misa, he shouldn't be doing them. Okay, shchita is different. Shchita a non-Kohen can do, but could he do holacha? Could a non-Kohen schlep the blood from the makam shchita to the mizbeach? Okay, we understand the zar has to throw the blood, but maybe holacha he could do. It sounds very strange. So the Ravid writes that every time it says, the zar is not chayiv misa, it doesn't mean he's allowed to do it. He's not supposed to do it. A Kohen's supposed to do it. Just he's not chayiv misa b'dei shemayim if a zar does it. So the Ravid takes him to task. It's very not pashut, but really I think we're going to find out when we have the Bayis Shlishi. When we have the temple back, we're going to find out, because if we paskin like the Rambam say it's a tremendous fundraising opportunity. Can you imagine? Because if you're auctioning off hadlakas neros of the menorah, if only Kohanim can bid, okay, we understand, it might be 50, 60,000, 100,000. If anyone could bid on hadlakas neros, even a Yisrael, $1 million, $1 billion, how much to light the menorah in the temple? How much would someone bid? It's an amazing thing. So it's a tremendous, according to the Rambam, a tremendous fundraising opportunity. The Minchas Chinuch writes about this. He says, he has a kash about this. He says maybe they would use a long wick because we never find the menorah was taken out. We do find the shulchan was taken out. Remember, they would take out the shulchan. Why? Yeah? The mikvah. Yes, they would take it out to the mikvah if it got tameh. And then they asked the question, why would it get tameh? Because they pulled it out to show everybody. What were they showing them? The bread. They're showing the bread was still hot. The bread was still fresh and hot. Every week they would show them the miracle. They show them on Yantiv. They show them on the Regolim. They show them this miracle. Hashem loves you so much, he keeps your bread fresh, which is showing us that Hashem is taking care of our parnasa. Every single day, even if we're working on a salary, even if we're retired and we have a pension, we might think our parnasa is taken care of for the most part. But no, every single day Hashem is keeping our parnasa fresh. Hashem keeps us in mind. Potech et yadecha al misbeh l'chol hay ratzon, as we say in davening pretty soon. So Hashem keeps us in mind every day. That's the lesson of the shulchan, that the bread was fresh. So the shulchan we saw could be taken out, but the menorah we never seen taken out. So the Minchas Chinuch says maybe a long wick, I don't know, maybe a long match. It sounds strange, but the Rambam writes if they did take the menorah out, maybe they shouldn't, but if they did, then a zar, a non-Kohen, could light the menorah, which again could be a tremendous fundraising opportunity for the temple coming soon. Good. Anyway. So hadlaka lava vodahi, that was their conclusion. Elameata zar sesider amaracha l'chayev. So you're talking about comparing the hadlakas neros to the arranging wood in the mizbech. So a non-Kohen who arranged the wood should be chayev misa. Ikasider shnei gezerei etzim. Even after you arrange the firewood, there's the 2 special logs of a special size they always put on the mizbeach. So either shnei gezer and the chayev. So if he puts those logs on, he should be chayev. Ika sidur ivarim. But you have to put the limbs on. Really, the service of burning is to put the limbs of the korbanot onto the pyre on the mizbeach. So Rabbi Yochanan did say that a non-Kohen who puts on those 2 blocks of firewood, he is chayev misa. That has to be done with a Kohen, even though it's just firewood. We actually saw in Zvachim an amazing Gemara. If somebody brings a carbon eitzim to the Mizbeach, somebody brings a carbon of firewood to the Mizbeach, he has to bring firewood to burn his firewood. And it also needs a dash of salt, because Bekol Karban Chatakriv Melach, so he's bringing a carbon of firewood, so you need a Kohen to put it on, but even your firewood needs firewood. So even your offerings need a little offering. Sometimes this is why we say Hashem's Fatah Tiftach. Even our prayers need a little prayer to get them off the ground here. So we see that a hadlakat nerot, machloket, but putting wood on the mizbeach for the fire, Rabbi Yochanan says chayev. Baha pligi marsavar avoda tamahi. Rabbi Yochanan says it's avoda tama. It's a final stage of avoda. Marsavar lo avoda tamahi. And the other one says no, it's not avoda tama. It's just putting on wood, but putting on the limbs afterwards would be chayev for a non-Kohen who did that. Tani kivase de Rav, Tani kivase de Levi. Now remember, Rav says that the Chotzas Hadeshin, Shumas Hadeshin, is not an avoda for a zar to be chayev misa. A zar can't do it, but he's not chayev misa b'dei shemayim for doing it. Tani gavase derav, avoda shazar chayev alehem mita. These are the avodot that a non-Kohen is chayev misa b'dei shemayim. Zrikat dam, bein lifnim, the throwing of the blood, whether it's inside, bein lifnai lifnim, or it's lifnai lifnim in the Kodesh Kodashim. So there was a zrika done in the heichal, on the mizbeach. There's also zrika done inside, either on the aron or the parochas. We mentioned the parochas that Bar Yochai saw in Rome, could be there. Hamazeh bechatat of, or someone sprinkles blood of a chatat of. Remember, they did malika to chatat of. The Kohen would use his thumbnail and to make an incision in the neck there, and then they would sprinkle the bird. They're holding the bird and sprinkle the blood onto the mizbeach there. But an olat of is a little different. After they did the milika to slaughter the bird, they would actually squish it onto the mizbeach to get the dam out by squishing the olat of. Hamenasech, for someone who does nisach of how much? Shlosha lugin mayim, 3 log of mayim on sukkis, shlosha lugin yayin, or 3 log of wine any day. Tani kivase de Levi. So those ones are, this Brisa supports Rav. It does not list Trumas Hadeshin, Otzas Hadeshin. All of these things are a final stage in the avoda. So remember, the blood is what brings the kapara. So the blood application is what actually finishes the job. Tani kivase de Levi. There's also Brisa supporting Levi. Avodot shezar chayev alehem mita. These are the avodot where a non-Kohen is chayev mita if he does it. Hamerim et Hadeshin. There it is. Harama Hadeshin, Shumat Hadeshin. There's this word merim, lifting up the deshin. And it's even a kometz full. V'sheva hazar shebifnim, and the 7 sprinklings inside for the hatal pnimiot, sheba metzora, or sprinkling for the metzora. Hamale al gabei mizbeach, or someone who brings up onto the mizbeach items to burn. Bein davar kasher, bein davar pasul. We talked a lot about back in Zvachim about pigul versus pasul, and if you brought something up to the mizbeach, there were certain things that were pasul, but they weren't so pasul. Remember, pigul was like way out. Pigul, no way. You're not going to bring that on mizbeach. But certain things were pasul. It was chutz lizman, not chutz l'makom. Certain stringencies where if you brought it up, you could leave it there to burn, even though you shouldn't have brought it up. But once you brought it up, we're not going to take it down. We're going to let the mizbeach consume it. That's a whole sugya in Zvachim. But he's saying that bringing something up is the final stage of an avoda, bringing it up on the mizbeach to burn. So that would be a problem for a zar. But we saw here harama. So there's a brisa supporting Levi also. Harama Hadeshin, Trumas Hadeshin would be chayev mita. So that's, even though it sounds like taking out the trash. So both sides, we have a big zuchus. We get to take out the trash at home. And Baruch Hashem, we should be reminded of Chotzas Hadeshin. We'll go a little further, a little more time. Good. The 2 dots. Lama mefisin. Why do we draw lots? Why do we draw lots? Lama mefisin kidamran. Like we told you about this. The Mishnah told you there was a Maisa during the foot race where somebody broke his leg. Got pushed and broke his leg. And that's a reason to draw lots. And then yesterday we saw there was, God forbid, there was a bloodshed. There was killing. Remember King Menashe, Rabbi Silber described yesterday, King Menashe had murdered so many people that bloodshed was kal be'enav. It wasn't such a big deal when someone died. They were more concerned about the knife. The father of the kid who got stabbed was more concerned about the knife becoming tameh He says, go ahead, pull out the knife, even though his son might die faster, because he wants the knife to be tahor. He's more concerned about that than the actual bloodshed, because Menashe had, gotten everybody used to it. It's a musar for us. If we're out in a modern workplace, modern society, there's all sorts of messages out there, and we can get used to them. We need to understand that our message is right here in the Daf Yomi. Our message is right here in the Chumash. Our message is not in the mainstream media. Our message is not anywhere else except in Torah and mitzvot. That's our real message. Otherwise, we're going to get influenced by outside forces, because you can get used to anything, as Rabbi Silber said yesterday. So that was Menashe. That's it. So good. So that's Hadamaran. That's why we draw lots. We draw lots because the races became a problem, became dangerous. Ela lama mefisin v'chozim mefisin. Why do we draw lots and draw lots again? Rashi points out, and we're going to see 4 times. It wasn't just once in the morning. It was 4 times throughout the day. They would draw lots for the different avodot. So why do you go back and you do it 4 different times? Rabbi Yochanan, kadei lahargish, to get feeling, lahargish kol azara, to have energy and emotion in all of the azara. Shneimar, like there's a pasuk that tells us that we're supposed to be emotional. Asher yachdav, that together, namtik, sod beveis elokeinu, lachalach b'rogish, that we're going to go and we're going to come into the Beis Elokim, we're going to come into the temple, and we're going to go berogish. Rogish is Lashon hergish, is feeling, emotion. So it's supposed to be done with emotion. We're supposed to go into the shul with emotion. Now, Baruch Hashem, it's a lot easier now that we have the coffee back. It's much easier to come into the building with emotion. It's very good, but you see that we went into the temple with hergish. So drawing lots, it's exciting, Rabosai. It's, this is a makor for Simchas Torah, for auctioning off kibudim, auctioning off, hakafos, things like this. It's with hergish. It's exciting. People are bidding. People are excited. People are selecting. Or you're looking forward to what kibbutz you're going to get or what you want to do. So it's something to do with excitement when you come in to do an avodah. Shnamar, all right, we read the pasuk. Good. B'mei mafisin. In what do they draw lots? So they would draw lots 4 times a day. What were they wearing? Rav Nachman Amar big day chol. Rav Nachman says their weekday suit. They weren't wearing the big day kahuna yet. Rav Sheshes Amar big day kodesh. Rav Sheshes says no, they were wearing the big day kahuna. Rav Nachman Amar big day chol. Why would we want them not wearing their big day kahuna? The Amar big day kodesh. If they're already wearing their begadim and they're ready to go, they're already washed and dressed and ready. Ikabali's road. There will be the masters of arms, the strong-armed guys, we call them in English. The chamse, they're going to force their way in. Va'avdei, they're already dressed and ready to go. They didn't win the lottery, but they really want to do it, and they're going to run up and do it. We saw already the Kohanim are going to run up and do the avoda if we let them. So here too, the guys who are so strong and are a little more aggressive, a little more zaris in an aggressive way, they're going to run up and do the avoda if they're already dressed. Rav Sheshes Amar big day kodesh. Rav Sheshes says, no, they should still wear big day kodesh, even though that's a possibility. To eat Amrat big day chol, if they're wearing regular clothing, non-Kohanic clothing, agav havivuse, it's because the one who wins the lottery he loves the mitzvah, he loves this avodah he has to do. Mikra v'avdei, he's going to go up and do it right now, even wearing his weekday clothing. So we see these 2 competing factors, that we shouldn't wear the big day kahuna because somebody who's loses the lottery might push his way in and do the avodah right now before the guy who actually is supposed to do it can get up there and do it. So if they're already ready, there's a danger that someone's going to be zaris in a sort of aggressive, assertive, not recommended manner. And then the other factor is we should wear the big kahuna because the kohanim are zrizim, and he's going to want to do it right now. He's going to do. I've selected for the avoda. I've selected for the truma session. Oh, beautiful! He's going to run up without changing his clothes and washing his hands and feet first. So we see that there's competing elements of zrizut. Zrizut, of course, is a good midah to have. We talked about midos. Zrizut is very important. We have to have zrizut in the right places. We have to have zrizut, our motivation to be for chavivuse, for our love of Torah and mitzvot. Shkoyach Rabosai.